Today's lecture will be about Saul Kripke's work on direct reference theory. In this video, I will give you an overview of what we'll be going over in the lecture, and I will also go through some review on Frege and Russell on meaning and reference, so some important lessons or points to take away from the previous two lectures, which happened last week. So here is the overview. In the 1970s, Kripke made influential contributions to the debate about reference and meaning that Frege and Russell kicked off at the turn of that century. In founding, or being one of the main founders of direct reference theory, Kripke, 1, agreed with Russell and disagreed with Frege that there is only reference. So Kripke agreed with Russell that there was no sense as a part of the meaning of linguistic expressions, and rejected Frege's notion of sense. Furthermore, too, Kripke disagreed with Russell that proper names are disguised definite descriptions. And in fact, the very central idea of Kripke was that proper names were directly referential. So this is why there is a name direct reference theory. Finally, and very importantly for our course, Kripke disagreed with Russell and Frege that there are any cognitive constraints on meaning. So in doing this third thing, Kripke's work opened a new way of understanding Frege's puzzle. So I will begin with some review of the important similarities and differences between Frege and Russell on meaning and reference. First, here are the important differences between Frege and Russell. Frege and Russell differed in what they took the meaning or meanings of linguistic expressions to be. For Frege, the meaning of an expression is a way of thinking of its referent. For Russell, on the other hand, the meaning is just the referent. For Russell, there is no sense, only reference. At the level of sentences, we can say that both Frege and Russell held that meanings are propositions or thoughts, and that these propositions are composed out of the meanings of the sentence's parts. So there is a similarity. However, this means that the important difference between the two is that they had different conceptions of what propositions are. So starting with a Fregean proposition, Frege's conception of a proposition, i.e. the meaning of a sentence, which he also calls a thought, is that it's a way of thinking of a truth value. So the referent of a sentence is a truth value, and its meaning is a proposition, which is a way of thinking of the truth value. So this is at the level of sense and not reference. So here is an example. Take, for instance, the sentence, Corona is tasty. The name Corona, according to Frege, has a way of thinking of a thing, i.e. Corona beer, as its meaning. The predicate has a way of thinking of the concept of tastiness as its meaning. Now, together, these two senses i.e. the way of thinking of this object and the way of thinking of this concept, they combine to give you the meaning of the sentence, which is a way of thinking of the truth value of Corona is tasty. So let's say it's true that Corona is tasty. When you grasp the proposition expressed by this sentence, what you're doing is you're thinking of the truth value true in a particular way. And the particular way in which you are thinking of that truth value true is by thinking of an object and thinking of a concept, and that object, in fact, falls under that concept. A Russellian proposition is at the level of reference. The meaning of a sentence contains the objects and properties or concepts that names and predicates refer to. So there is no senses according to Russell. For example, suppose that the demonstrative, this desk, is a genuine referring expression. Now consider the sentence, this desk is messy, where I am pointing at the desk in front of me. The Russellian proposition that this sentence expresses contains the desk itself, this thing I'm pointing at, the desk, and the property or concept in Frege's terminology of being messy. Here are the important similarities between Frege and Russell. So to review what I just said, Frege and Russell disagreed about the nature of propositions and meaning in general. But they both accepted cognitive constraints on meaning. Focusing on referring expressions, which we will throughout this course, both Frege and Russell accepted the following principle, which can be understood as a cognitive constraint on meaning. The principle is as follows. A name N contributes an object O to the proposition expressed by any simple sentence containing N, just in case someone can understand N in virtue of the ability to identify O directly, where directly means without the aid of a mediating mode of presentation. Now, Frege thought that we never have the ability to identify objects directly. So, he claimed, given this principle, that referring expressions had senses as well as reference. So, referring expressions do not contribute their object to the proposition expressed by sentences containing them. Instead, they contribute the mediating sense. Russell, on the other hand, claimed that most names were hidden descriptions, so they also do not contribute any object to the propositions they help express. But Russell thought we could genuinely refer to sense data, so we could have names that contributed sense data to the propositions they help express. So, in summary, the important similarities between Frege and Russell is that they had a cognitive understanding or cognitive constraints on meanings. The final bit of review will be Russell's theory of descriptions of names. So, what he meant by the claim that names, or most names, were hidden, definite descriptions. And we'll also look at an important, more advanced or sophisticated version of this theory, given by Searle. So, as more review, Russell's simple description theory, the one we talked about in the last lecture, was as follows. According to Russell, each proper name is a disguised or abbreviated description. That is, each proper name is associated with a description which is such that 1. The name's bearer, the thing it picks out, if it picks out anything, is the thing which satisfies or uniquely satisfies that description. And this is how we can say the reference of a name is fixed. Second, the name contributes the descriptions to the proposition expressed by a sentence containing it. And this is what we might call the semantic component of Russell's theory. Third, understanding the name consists in associating it with the right description. And this we might call the epistemic component or cognitive component because it has to do with understanding. Now, I will give you an example in a moment, but before I give you the example, I would like to go over a simple objection to this Russell's version of the description theory of names. The objection goes as follows. Either the associated description completely describes the bearer, or it does not. If it does, if the description that the name stands for completely describes the thing in the world it's trying to pick out, then every true sentence about the object is true in virtue of its meaning. Now we can see this by reflecting on the second part of theory, which is that the name contributes the description to the proposition expressed by a sentence containing it. So if the description contributed is a complete, total description, accurate description of the bearer, any information we want to furthermore predicate of that bearer will be true in virtue of the meaning, because that information will already be contained in what the name or the subject of the sentence contributes to the proposition expressed by the sentence. So it can't be that the associated description completely describes the bearer. Now, on the other hand, if the associated description does not completely describe the bearer, then there is a following question. How is it determined which particular true description is the one that's relevant for meaning? So how is it determined which subset of the total description is the one that is relevant for meaning? So this is the objection that Searle gives in his paper, Proper Names. Now I haven't assigned this reading as required or even supplementary. However, if you're interested in looking into it further, I recommend reading this paper. However, right now I'm just going to provide you with his basic criticism of Russell and his more sophisticated version of description theory, both of which we will see are criticized by Kripke. Now, before talking about Searle's cluster theory, which is the more sophisticated version of the description theory, let me give you an example which will help fix our ideas and will help understand this objection that I've just given. So I want you to consider the name Aristotle. Now here are a bunch of possible definite descriptions that this name may correspond to. So the student of Plato, the teacher of Alexander the Great, the last great philosopher of antiquity, that's a typo, sorry. And another final example of a description is the founder of the Lyceum, which was his school he founded. Now, of course, there's many other descriptions that we could add here, but here I've just given you a bunch of possible definite descriptions which this name may be short for, or maybe a disguised version of. Now, to return to the objection, if we claim that Aristotle is short for the conjunction of all of these descriptions, of every true way we can describe Aristotle, then nothing that we say about Aristotle can be informative, because in understanding the name Aristotle, we already grasp all of the true information about him. That he was, for instance, the student of Plato, that he was a teacher of Alexander, that he was the last great philosopher of antiquity, etc. But on the other hand, if only one of these definite descriptions is the one that is relevant for the meaning of the name Aristotle, there's a question of which one is it. Why is it, for instance, that Aristotle would be associated in virtue of its meaning with the description, the student of Plato, but not the teacher of Alexander? So the question is, how is it that a certain subset of these descriptions are the ones relevant for meaning? Now, Searle's cluster theory is a more sophisticated version of the description theory, which is supposed to meet this problem. So according to Searle, a proper name is associated with a cluster of descriptions such that the following things hold. And these are more sophisticated versions of 1 to 3 of Russell's view. So first, the reference fixing component. The name's bearer, if it has one, is the thing which satisfies an appropriate weighted selection of descriptions in the cluster. So think of all of these descriptions here as being a part of a cluster of descriptions of Aristotle. Now, what Searle suggests is how the name Aristotle, which is short for this cluster or disjunction of these descriptions, is that the bearer is a thing which satisfies a certain amount of these to an appropriate degree. So there's a whole bunch of different information associated with the name, but the way that the information fixes a name is by weighting different pieces of this information. Now, second, the semantic component. The name contributes the cluster to the proposition expressed by a sentence containing it. So when we talk about Aristotle, we're in a sense talking about the thing which is at least some of all of these properties. And that's very different than saying, according to the Russellian view, where we have a total description. What that one is saying is that when we talk about Aristotle, we're talking about the thing which has all of these, or the conjunction of these. Whereas on Searle's cluster theory, one should think of it more that all of these descriptions are associated with the name, but we're not trying to talk about the thing which has all of them, but the thing which has a certain amount of them, or one or the other. Okay, so that is the more advanced semantic component of the cluster theory. And now third, Searle says, for the epistemic component, what understanding the name consists of is associating it with the right cluster of descriptions. So again, instead of trying to fix on one particular description, that is the meaning of the name, rather there may be a whole cluster of different possible information that we associate with the name. So now I will move on in the next video to Kripke's arguments against both of these versions of the description view, and then I'll conclude the lecture with Kripke's alternative positive view of names.